If you're heading off to Disney and don't know where to start.
Hello, everyone. This is Dusty Sage looking all scruffy in the MiceChat mansion. We are, of course, sheltering in place here in California. You'll see that there's Logan Collins on the screen as well. Also sheltering in California. And at the bottom there, we have Chloe Ferreira. And Chloe, you are in Florida.
Yes.
So we're spanning the country today to talk about some really wild news in the Disney universe and beyond. The theme parks finally have started sharing their closure extensions. Of course, Disneyland was the first one to announce earlier in the month, March, that they would be closing through the end of March. And right after Disney made their announcement at Disneyland, then immediately Disney World announced, and Universal and SeaWorld, and everybody kept that same date that Disneyland used, which was the end of this month. And we all knew that that was overly ambitious, but I'm sure Disney was just afraid of what would happen if they had to cancel too many reservations all at once. And there's tens of thousands of guests that have booked vacations to Disneyland and Disney World, and they all need to get either canceled and refunded or rebooked for a later date. So Disney used a pretty conservative date for their economic purposes that needs to now be pushed out. But they waited a really long time to do that. And we're just a few days away from the end of the month. April 1st will be here in just a few days. And that's when the parks were supposed to reopen. And we're all still trapped in our homes. So clearly there are people probably in countries across the globe that have no concept of what's going on in Orlando and Anaheim that may already be here in the States, waiting for the Disney parks to reopen. So Disney waited a little too long. Start with you, Logan. So what was the announcement that Disney made today regarding their closure extension?
Well, today Disney announced that they will not be reopening on April 1st, and that they will be continuing to pay cast members through April 18th, which, to be honest, I wasn't totally sure they were even going to be paying cast members, so it was kind of a relief to see that, especially with how long they waited on the announcement. But they did not give a reopening date, unfortunately. All of us fans, they did not give us a date.
Until further notice, right?
Yep.
That's a little bit scary for the travel industry because there are a lot of hotels that aren't owned by Disney that have no idea when to reopen. Now, many of them have closed. Some of them are trying to stay open, but at this point, they're all just going to probably have to close and wait for Disney to make a last minute announcement like they did here and then scramble to get reopened. Because one thing we've learned is Disney is not being very transparent about their decisions. They're waiting till the last minute. Chloe, what's happening at Disney World in regard to the closures?
Same thing as kind of looped into Disneyland, where they're closed indefinitely, but they are paying their cast members through April 18th right now. So it's same plan so far, which, I mean, we can kind of speculate when they're going to reopen, but April 18th is, a safe date, I guess. I really think they're kind of, doing it in 2 or 3 week chunks rather than announcing, until the end of
exactly.
May.
It's interesting, and we'll get back to the employee payment question here in just a second, but Universal picked a mid-April date for their reopening. Knott's Berry Farm picked a date, even safer than that. They're going to go into mid-May or whenever it's safe to open, which seemed like a little more of a safe bet in my opinion. And then other parks have been all over the map on the dates they've picked. Now, before, everybody was all on the same date because Disneyland went first and everybody followed Disney. But because Disney waited so long, and I'm sure travel agents and guests and tourists were all screaming at these entertainment enterprises, when are you reopening? We have to plan our vacations, that they all just made their own dates. And now the industry is fragmented. And I think that adds a lot of confusion for people who may be trying to plan trips, because you normally wouldn't go to just Universal. You'd do Universal and Disney and maybe SeaWorld, but you might not be as inclined to go if not all of them were reopened.
Exactly.
So at first, because Disney said they were going to pay all their employees through the end of this month, everyone else said they would do the same. Now, going forward, I'm not sure that's really going to be the case, and we'll talk about one example, it's a very extreme example of people that are not going to get paid, a lot of people. Disney is promising to pay through the middle of next month now, but they're not promising to pay beyond that, even though they have not announced a date for when the parks are reopening. So they have given us a date that they will pay their employees through, but they haven't given us a date when the parks will actually reopen. And I think they may have been pushed into announcing some payments because of the union, and they did not notify the union or allow the union to negotiate with them. And now they're up against the end of the month and they have to announce something. So I think they were forced into doing a couple extra weeks of pay because of the unions. Thank goodness for the cast members. And then going forward, we'll see what happens. They could furlough cast members, and those cast members would then be eligible for unemployment. And there was a stimulus package that was just passed today by our federal government, which will give workers some extra pay above and beyond what they're getting from their state unemployment. That comes very close to full wages. And so that's a good thing for all the people who are potentially being furloughed. And since that happened, I think it's very likely Disney will immediately begin negotiations with the union so that they can establish the length of time for those employees to file for unemployment and get almost their full wages from federal and state unemployment rather than from the company. And you have to realize, folks, that Disney is just bleeding money right now. Almost every business unit is closed or impacted severely. So I can't imagine what it must be like right now. This is not the time you want to be the CEO of the Disney Corporation, and it has a brand new CEO.
I mean, did I have a crystal ball or something? Like, what's going on?
Right? Like, this is just that Bob Iger would step down just days before the world collapsed. Like,
So tiny.
he had to know something was going on. Am I right? Like, come on. This is nuts. So we talked very briefly about what is going on at another theme park enterprise. And this is super sad news, folks. But for many years now, SeaWorld has been struggling. They've had declining attendance ever since the Blackfish documentary. Some of their parks have recovered a little bit, others have not. And they own a lot of parks. You know, people just think, oh, the Sea Life parks. But they also have the Busch Gardens parks, and I think they have a Sesame Street park?
Yes.
In a mall somewhere, I think.
Yeah,
And all of that, Sesame Place, that's it. And all of that will be closed for an indefinite period of time, and 90% of their workforce is going to be furloughed. So that is a huge number of people. The park in Orlando is massive. The park in California is a good size, and the one in Texas is a smaller regional size parks, but all of those parks have large animals. So they have orcas, they have dolphin, they have all sorts of critters, and I'm worried that some of the parks have polar bears. So this is a big deal to me. I'm a huge animal lover, and I'm worried. Like, Chloe, I know you're out there a lot. You go to SeaWorld. What are your thoughts? Like, what's the best and worst case scenario here for SeaWorld?
I mean, as far as we know, the animal care team are still there, correct?
Yeah, so they're keeping their keepers and their animal caregivers, which are not quite zookeepers, but they're, trained to handle the animals, and they're being kept.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's good. I mean, it's terrible for, all the other employees that have to leave the company. 90% is a lot of employees when you span the entire company. But as long as the animals are taken care of and they're safe and healthy, then we'll one day hopefully have a park to go back to. But it's scary times for sure.
It is. Here's my worry. SeaWorld doesn't have an income right now because, unlike the Disney company, which has movies and other things they can make a little bit of money on and merchandise, SeaWorld has just the theme parks, and they're closed, and they were already hurting financially.
Yeah.
So they still have to pay rent on some of the land. at the sea life parks, they have those huge water purification systems that use a tremendous amount of energy. So it's very expensive to run an aquatic park. Those of you who have small aquariums at home know that your energy bill is a lot higher than your neighbor just from having a small aquarium. Now imagine having one that was hundreds of thousands of gallons of water to sustain an orca. And that water has to be kept perfect for them at all times. So the expenses of food, we're talking tons of food a day, all the energy, all of the care from the keepers, that is an enormous daily expense with no income for a company that was already stressed. So I'm worried about it because I don't know at what point SeaWorld should ask for assistance. And I think in the case of California and Florida, where their two largest parks are, they could probably ask for some government assistance because it's the health and welfare of the animals at stake, but also the ability of them to even reopen as an entertainment enterprise for the travel industry when this crisis is over. So I'm hoping SeaWorld doesn't wait until the last minute when it becomes a public crisis and everybody's up in arms, will the orca go hungry? And that they ask for help early and get it. And if they need to ask the community like us to donate, I am willing to start donating to SeaWorld right now. And I do not have an annual pass to SeaWorld. I'm not a big, huge fan of SeaWorld, folks. But I would be willing to prepay several years of annual pass money to them right now if it will ensure that those animals get cared for at least until this crisis is over in exchange for an annual pass or something later on from them. And so, SeaWorld, if you're thinking out there, you're listening to this, because I'm sure you have nothing better to do, just know that I think there are people out there that care enough about the animals to help you out. So what else did we learn today? Anything that we should be aware of, Logan?
They furloughed, I think, 90% of their employees.
Yeah, 90%, if you can imagine the number of people. Any other parks making announcements today that we should mention to the folks? I think we heard from Legoland that they are extending into April in California. I'm not sure if Florida has made an announcement yet. And I was still waiting to hear from Six Flags when we went on, when we recorded this. So we'll know a little bit. Of course, you can find all the information out on MiceChat.com. In fact, if you go to the front page and you scroll down just a tiny bit, you'll see two little boxes, and one of them says Disney closures, and the other one says Disney Plus. Those are two resources for you. The Disney closures tells you everything we know about the closures, not just of the Disney parks, but of all the theme parks that we track. And the next one, the Disney Plus, is your entertainment guide. So you're stuck at home, and we want to tell you what you can watch. And Chloe, a lot of that was written by you. In fact, you wrote something really, really cool that's not really exactly a Disney Plus thing, but tell us about your 90's idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've watched these episodes, growing up as they, rerun on TV, ABC Family, what have you. And I just got to thinking, because someone mentioned the step-by-step episode, which is just full of now defunct things, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, Pleasure Island in Downtown Disney, the Mike Fink Kill Boat, so much, and they're staying on property. So I just got to thinking, how many are there out there and why did this come about? And I just compiled all of the 90s specifically sitcom. I think Blossom was technically 89, but I went from 89 to the whole 90s and where you can watch them. Most of them are Hulu, one's Disney Plus. I think some are Amazon, but that's kind of like your set playlist to getting your Disney parks fix, especially like your 90s heyday feel of the parks, because it's very nostalgic. And of course, especially now because we're all missing the parks and none of us can go. So it's kind of like watching a home video, but with your favorite sitcom.
What was my favorite part? Because I'm editing your article late at night and I'm getting stuck watching all these episodes because I'm like, oh, I wonder, she mentioned this was at Disneyland. I wonder if it was really at Disney World. I better go watch it. And the next thing I know, I've watched the entire episode of Blossom.
Oh my gosh.
And these shows are cringeworthy by today's standards, which makes them so much fun. But they're at Epcot, at 1 minute, and then the next thing you know, they're on Main Street, USA. Like they'll open a door and they'll have just magically transported from one
Boy Meets
park to
World
another.
is the worst. Full House did it a lot too, where it was a lot of Epcot Magic Kingdom, but Boy Meets World, it was literally they were at Living Seas, and then all of a sudden they were at Splash Mountain, and then they were back at somewhere in Epcot, and then they were on a ride at Magic Kingdom. I was like, what's going on? Like anybody who's familiar with the parks would go crazy, but they're still fun.
I'm horrible with the names. I think Uncle Jesse and the other guy from Full House were in that little bubble thing inside the Living Seas doing a radio show.
Yeah, and a lot of that didn't make
outrageous.
sense either. They were talking about how do they get out of the thing. It's like, okay, well, how did you get in there in the first place? They were scared of a shark that was swimming by, but it was like clearly filmed in a different tank than the one they were in, and it's a riot.
It is great. So check it out, folks. Just go to MiceChat.com and you can find all the current news about the theme parks and stuff to do, including including Chloe's article that I really want everyone to check out. So that brings us to the end of our first little video cast here on MiceChat, and we are going to do these as often as we can. And I'll tell you, we're going to work a little deal out with you all. So the more comments and likes and shares that you give us on this video, the more often we will do it. And Chloe suggested that you let us know the questions you would like to see us answer, and we will research those and come back on and do more shows. We could potentially do them every single day or most weekdays at the very least. So let us know what you want to know, and if there's enough content, we'll be right here for you. And we can even share some videos and photos and things on these video casts as well. And if you'd really like to, if there's a really good topic, we can even do some shows live. So we're gonna have some fun here with you out there in the MiceChat world. So please follow along on YouTube. That's youtube.com/MiceChat, or anytime, MiceChat.com, and we'll have all the info there for you. We'll see you all again real soon. Thank you, everybody.
MiceChat.